The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, for joining us today. I'm so glad to have you all with us. My name is Chelsea Collier. I'm the editor-at-large of Smart Cities Connect, and we're going to have a great discussion today on shedding light on dark skies, the rise of intelligent illumination. And before I go ahead and introduce our panelists, we had a great conversation about this very topic with these same wonderful panelists at Smart Cities Connect this fall in DC. And we enjoyed the conversation so much. I know I learned so much, and those who are joining us for the conference said so as well. So we thought not to be selfish and that we would offer this to everyone who's able to tune in today. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And here with us today, joining us as panelists are Tim Brothers, who's the observatory manager at MIT, Keith Chinchar, who's the vice president of smart lighting for Ubiquia, and Paul Vessel, who's the vice president of Western United States for RTE Energy Solutions. So thank you all again for sharing your time and your expertise with us. So why don't we just go ahead and everybody say hi for a quick minute or two, and then we'll get kicked off with a great slide presentation, and then at the end we'll have a few minutes for questions, and our awesome team at Smart Cities Connect is going to help us manage the questions. So as they come up, feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat, and we'll have a few minutes at the end to answer. So Tim, why don't you start off?
Hi, everyone. I am so glad to see so many people interested in dark skies and intelligent lighting. It's really thrilling to see that we're sort of turning the corner on developing some solutions for our community and hopefully yours too.
Great. And Tim, can you repeat your title and just a quick note on your introduction? There was a little bit of issue with the audio.
Sure. So I am the observatory manager at MIT's Wallace Astrophysical Observatory. We're an observatory about 45 miles northwest of Boston, outside of the city lights. That's why we were installed here about 50 years ago. And I'm also a technical instructor in astronomy classes here as well, and a dark sky advocate for the Dark Sky Association.
Nice. You bring a lot to this conversation. We really appreciate it. Keith, you're no stranger to Smart Cities Connect. Go ahead and introduce yourself to anyone who's new.
Good morning or good afternoon. Yeah, I'm Keith Chinchar, electrical engineer in a background, but currently in the role of running the smart lighting program for Ubiquia. I've been in lighting controls for about 25 years, so I've seen kind of the introduction of LEDs into the marketplace and the learning curve that we've been going through and continue to go through. So very excited to see us equate not just lighting, but lighting controls and the theory of lighting to dark skies and find different ways to all work together.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Paul.
Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Vessel. I'm Vice President, Western Region for RTE Energy Solutions, formerly Real Term Energy. We have deployed hundreds of thousands of luminaires, mainly streetlights in over 400 cities across North America. And in many, if not most cases, dark skies are an important requirement for those projects. So I've had the pleasure of working both with Keith and with Tim on those projects, and look forward to talking to you some more about how the three of us see dark skies, and hopefully that will assist you, any of you that are looking to make your skies darker as you move forward.
Yeah, it's fun to have the band back together again, right? And it's part of what I really love about this topic. And we'll go to the next slide, and I'll just do a real quick kind of overview on our agenda, and then we'll get started with the presentation. But this topic around dark skies and smart lighting, if you came into this conversation even a year ago, it would be easy to think that these topics were on opposite ends without much shared purpose. But what I've learned, and I think what you all have definitely proven, is that there are overlapping agendas and, you know, concerns about light pollution for aesthetic issues, environmental issues, and the interest of smart lighting. Those two things don't have to operate in opposition. They actually work really wonderfully together. So you can have it all. That's basically the highlight of this topic. But we're going to talk about what light pollution is, what smart lighting is, and how all of this can come together in service of communities. So let's go ahead and get started with the next slide. And Tim, just kind of kick us off, you know, what is light pollution? What do we need to know as we're going through?
Yeah, so I'll sort of do a top level definition, literally here. And in this case, our first image is actually looking at the Earth from space and focusing specifically on some of the geographical areas we're going to be talking about in Massachusetts. So we're seeing southern New England here. This is the classic NASA blue marble image. And what we're looking at is nighttime on Earth. And so at first glance, it looks sort of like a beautiful Christmas tree in some sense, right? You sort of see these lacy lighting patterns from space connecting our different metropolitan areas, whether it's Boston or New York or Hartford or Providence and so on. But it's an indication of a larger issue. And it doesn't just affect what I do at my night job, astronomy. It's what we call light pollution. It's a symptom of the inappropriate or excessive use of artificial light at night. We could boil that definition down even further and just call it energy waste. And that's essentially what we're seeing here is lighting. This is powered by electricity. This is burning carbon to generate, and it's going directly up into space. And only about, you know, maybe 3 people up in the space station can enjoy that. So that's not really serving a purpose. And the reason I started caring about this many years ago was because I'm an astronomer and I need to be able to see the objects we care about. Maybe they're a potentially hazardous asteroid or some exciting new exoplanet we've discovered. But that's getting harder and harder to see from our observatory in many locations across the United States. So that's sort of the angle that I came into it, and then sort of broadened our view as we connected with some of these fine folks, that there's some really potential to save energy and money as well for communities.
Yeah. Sounds great. That's a great overview. I really appreciate it. And Keith, I wonder on the next slide if you can just kind of give us the lighting 101.
Yeah, sure. You know, I think Tim mentioned light equaling energy waste. You know, we very rarely look at light in that manner. You know, we think of light, we wash our homes with it to accentuate things. The more the better seems to always be the situation. And the analogy I used when we talked last, and I think it kind of puts it into context, is, you know, we've all looked at light for different reasons, but very rarely do we equate it to energy. If we're at a hotel room, you know, we often put the light on in the bathroom and use the bathroom door as our dimmer, right? That's the most common dimmer in the world. But if we were to leave the sink on overnight to give ourselves some level of comfort, we would think that that's outrageous, right? So when you look at light as a wasted energy, it does come from a natural resource somewhere. That's the context and the thought process we want people to understand. So when you look at the different ways that light can be utilized, so you've got sky glow, as Tim mentioned, and you know that obviously has negative impacts. And Tim, the thing I wanted to talk to you about was, you know, we talk about, you know, you and I are very much into seeing stars, things like that, and that's sometimes more of a romantic thing, but there is definitely a long-term benefit to to an observatory. Why do we have observatories? Look at the technologies that we're creating that are space related, whether they're satellite or travel or other. Those things are negatively impacted by sky glow. It's not just our ability. You know, when people hear dark skies, they think, oh, it's the ability to see stars, and you know, who but Tim, Keith, and Paul care, right? But it's more than us, right? And it's more than that, right? But when you look at the other ways that light is and energy is wasted, it's, you know, glare. You know, there is an equation of light to safety, but too much light can cause unsafe situations. So the right amount of light needs to be considered. And then you have so that's over illumination, lighting glare, light trespass. If anyone's had LEDs installed into their to their city, they might experience situations, if not done correctly, where light can trespass into their homes, affecting things like circadian rhythm and sleep habits and those types of things. So lighting itself is not just putting light somewhere, it's putting the right amount of light where it's needed and at the right color temperature. So the lighting 101 here is, yes, lighting is critically important, but we need to also make sure that we design it properly, put it in the right place, keep it at the right level and at the right color temperature. So all of those things need to be considered when doing a lighting project.
Great. That's a great overview. And Tim, I wonder if you can just relate this back to sky glow, and then Paul, I think your expertise will be needed next.
Absolutely. We can actually go to the next slide, and I can jump off from there. So one thing I want to sort of get across too is that while I have the perspective of an astronomer, and we can sort of measure quantitatively or even qualitatively this light waste, this energy waste in terms of sky glow, it's an indicator of a larger problem. And I sort of want to frame it as, if you have a sky glow problem, that's sort of the canary in the coal mine for a larger light pollution problem. That you have light going where it doesn't need to be, it's maybe too bright, it's maybe the wrong color temperature. There's a lot of sort of the engineering aspects that need to be curtailed. And a lot of this is supported, whether it's the Dark Sky Association or the International or the Illuminating Engineering Society. So this is sort of the broad support for some of these core principles that we need to do a better job of managing light and controlling it when we do new installations, particularly with LEDs. So anyway, so what is sky glow? It's the brightening of the night sky. It's some of that uplight that is shining directly up into the sky or reflecting off of other things, and it's hitting the atmosphere and bouncing back at you. And of course, it diminishes the beautiful view of the night sky. But of course, that's an indicator of some of these other forms of energy waste. And so previous estimates were sort of shocking that light pollution is growing at 2.2% a year, and then more recent refined measurements said it's actually growing at 10% a year on average throughout the United States, and that's sort of an unconscionable, unreasonable amount of growth. If anything, it's actually the fastest growing environmental problem. And so the Department of Energy has studied this along with other groups, and there's sort of some main characteristics that contribute to this. One is what's fancy word for saying the color appearance, the spectral power distribution. It's the CCT, or color temperature. It's the number in thousands with the K after it on the side of the box when you buy a bulb at the store. The total lumen output, that's the brightness. We're often putting in too bright LEDs for the situation. That's where controllers can help set it to the appropriate level for that particular community. And the light distribution. So where does the light go? Is it directed at the target, the purpose, is it the crosswalk, or wherever you feel like you need the light for the task? And the part that you can install there that minimizes that is shielding. So you can prevent uplight entirely now. And so on the right is an image from our all sky camera. It's a 180-degree camera that can see the whole sky. It takes it every minute or two. You can find it on our website on any given night. And what it's capturing is the whole hemisphere above us, the celestial sphere. And to the north is towards New Hampshire on the top of the image. To the bottom of the image is south. And on the left side, that is east towards, say, the Boston or Lowell metropolitan areas. So you can see some light domes that we've always sort of just gotten used to at the observatory. But the things that have changed is in the south in particular. So when I first started in 2009, those light domes were not there. Those have changed dramatically in just a few years. And a large component of that, the cause, are major lighting installations. And some of those are poorly designed street lights that were before people really started utilizing some of the more recent advances. And then just to give you an idea, you don't need to sort of understand all of the units, but we can actually quantitatively measure easily the sky glow now. And so the darkest spots in Earth, say New Mexico, perhaps where Paul lives, you might see 20-second magnitude skies. That's where the Milky Way is legible, and it's sort of disorienting how many stars you can see for the average person. We're down to maybe less than 15% of the people can see the Milky Way in their hometown today in the United States. But you lose the Milky Way when you get down to 20.2. And in fact, the observatory in just the last year has now lost officially the Milky Way. So we're down below that 20.2, we're at 20.0. And while that's depressing to us astronomers, we think we have some solutions now that we can actually turn back the clock. So we'll get to those towards the end, but there is some hope here.
Yeah, good. Well, I was starting to get very concerned, but I know what's coming next, and it's starting to be good news and some solutions. So we'll advance to the next slide. And then, Paul, you have so much experience kind of designing these networks nationwide. What's kind of happening across the country as other communities are looking at this?
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea. So there's a large and growing movement across the country right now to put in place legislation to mandate control of light pollution. So I'll share with you some of what's happening around the country. Some of you may live in these states, and if not, maybe some of these legislative platforms may give you some ideas on how to move forward in your own state. So right now, there are about 17 states in the U.S. that either have dark sky legislation in place or that's pending. And what's driving this, and we've gone over most of these issues so far, is promoting energy conservation. Public safety is another important factor. Aesthetic interests and astronomical research, as Tim has pointed to. So Illinois, for example, they introduced SR 64 earlier this year, which encourages local governments in the state to utilize light fixtures that reduce, quote, unnecessary light and save energy when replacing existing light fixtures or adding new ones. Hawaii has established standards for outdoor lighting, including a requirement that all new outdoor light fixtures emitting a certain amount of lumens be fully shielded. Colorado requires full cutoff when output is more than 3,200 lumens. Massachusetts, where Tim is based, legislation which is pending right now in committee for 3,000 K. That refers to the CCT that Tim referred to earlier, and that's the limit, the color temperature limit that was established by the American Medical Association a few years ago to limit blue light exposure, which they found has an impact on circadian rhythms or sleep patterns. Also in Massachusetts, lights need to be fully shielded when they're publicly funded. And then in New York, State Bill SS 73 also passed this year. That bill notes that lights out legislation has successfully reduced excess light that was passed back in 2014. So it now specifies that after January 1st, 2026, all outdoor lighting fixtures shall be shielded, including outdoor lighting fixtures installed at residential, commercial, industrial, and municipal buildings. All right, so there's a lot happening on the legislative front, and some of you that live in states that don't have any legislation, you know, the International Dark Sky Association is a great vehicle to voice those concerns.
You know, from an engineering perspective, Keith, you know, it sounds like there are so many different kind of design parameters to work against, whether it's, you know, kind of the environment of the community that you're working in, or it's the kind of regulatory environment. Walk us through how communities can kind of think about this and how you advise them in this capacity.
Sure. You know, most cities are in one way discussing LEDs or have done an upgrade already. In some cases, in small quantities over the last 10 years, you know, we've seen the outdoor LED market just grow over time. You know, we're not talking about a technology that's been out there for decades, right? The first light luminaires or bulbs were developed probably mid 2000s, around 2005, 6, 7. Outdoor lighting has really been a phenomenon over the last 10 years. And during that time, you know, some of the first projects we've had were 4,000 Kelvin was kind of the standard. In some cases, people wanted 6,000 Kelvin. Tim's gonna just shake his head, right? These are the whiter the light, the better, right? The bluer the sky, we wanted our lights to be just brighter and brighter. If you're going to make a change, make it extremely noticeable. So over time, we've learned that there's a couple things that are necessary from an engineering standpoint. One is, you know, as Paul mentioned, shielding, right? Make sure that your the fixtures that you choose have the ability to be shielded. Most manufacturers can handle that. But controls is the next step. You know, when you look at the reasons to use controls, you can really break it down into 5 categories, right? One is energy savings, right? Immediately dimming the light reduces the output, energy is saved. Second is operation and maintenance, right? If you have lights that are on when they shouldn't be or off when they should be on, you know, a control system enables you to quickly understand the situation that your assets are under and enables you to quickly change those things. So there's an operational benefit. And for years, that's all we ever talked about, right? Energy and operations. And what we've seen is the transition from that into the 3 other categories that are relatively more modern, which is, one is safety. Understand that light level is in some way related to safety. Obviously, going from no light to light, we understand, but too much light is also unsafe, right? So finding the right light level and utilizing a control, whether it's to illuminate a crosswalk better or turn on lights when someone enters a space that was previously dark, or just having the right amount of light over time, right? So safety is one. Then you have a grid resiliency aspect of it, which is really not the topic of this conversation, but the ability to control all of your assets because they are electrical load. You know, between 2011 and 2015, the amount of electrical load associated with lighting in developed countries went from somewhere in the neighborhood of 7% to 14%. So it doubled and has grown since then. You know, as Tim mentioned earlier, the sky glow seen between 2009 and 2023 appeared, right? Yet our use or our energy use has decreased because of the types of luminaires, but we're using more of them. So our energy continues to grow. And then finally, you have the aspect of, let's see, we covered all 4, and then we have carbon emission, right? We have so many cities that have projects related to carbon emission, they bicycle lanes, things like that, but they don't look at a lighting project as a carbon emission project. Yet they have all those other benefits: safety, operation and maintenance savings, energy savings, and they're also a carbon emission project. So those are the kind of the 5 reasons why someone would do a control project, but they all relate to using an interdependency between a fixture and a control. And utilizing both of them is critical when designing a system. So hence the engineering side of it.
Yeah, good. I can imagine, you know, for the city leaders who are watching and listening right now, I can imagine it feels pretty overwhelming. Like, hey, what are the priorities in my community? How do I balance all of those? And, you know, you all each in your own capacity have each mentioned this idea of balance in terms of balancing all these priorities and being able to control them. And I think that those, you know, if you take 2 things away, those are the key aspects that we really want to focus on. So Tim, on the next slide, I'll let you lead this conversation, you know, just in terms of gives us a case study, you know, what you all have done around dark skies, and then we'll go back to you, Paul.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. So now we're going to move on from the observatory setting and move a couple towns west from Boston. The town of Pepperell, it happens to be the town I live in. This project happened not just because I live there, but also because we were sort of an outlier in Massachusetts. There was a huge push, a subsidized push by the state to retrofit LED streetlights. We were sort of the outlier in the sense that probably about 70% of the towns and cities had already converted. So we still had a chance to do it right, because I had seen so many, you know, installations not go well. There was a lot of citizen unhappiness with some of the previous early adopters. And so we thought, well, let's survey some of the places that did things well, or people were happy with it. The citizens were even happy, never mind dark skies. And one thing I found that was in common was that when there was citizen input, when there was involvement at all levels, from the government to the design company to the people on the ground who lived there, particularly if there was a demonstration of the lights, people were given options and input, things went a lot better. And so we tried to employ that model here at Pepperell. So what is Pepperell? It's a rural suburban transition town It happens to have 2 newly designated federally protected wild and scenic rivers. It's a small population in Massachusetts, about 12,000 people. It's relatively flat growth in terms of population, yet our sky glow is growing at almost 7% a year. So it's rapidly growing despite a very small population. And I sort of became alarmed when I did the math and said, geez, we're going to lose the Milky Way in about 5 years. We better get really involved. And also at the same time, we were conducting our own master plan. So it's sort of charting the course for the next 10 or 20 years. And it was 84% were really invested in keeping the town rural. And one of the components people cited for a rural character was keeping our dark skies. So the 2 maps below are just sort of think of them as qualitatively in some sense, that they're again measuring sort of a heat map for how intense the light waste is as seen from space. And you can see in the top right corner of each image, the city of Lowell. And in the top left is very rural towns, even west of Pepperell. And the darker areas, the blue and the dark blue, those are areas where you can readily see the Milky Way on a clear night in the summer. But you see those rapidly decreasing over. So those geographic areas are shrinking. And so we knew that it's not just Pepperell, it's all the towns. Everybody is using more light, and the LEDs in particular are causing some of this problem. And one of the other components of that color temperature, that blue light content, is the more blue light, the more it likes to scatter and go everywhere you don't want it to go. It's the same reason our sky is blue. And so those things sort of fed our requests from people like Paul and Keith that we want to have a little bit better control for our community, to match our community and what our community's needs were. And so the picture on the right is just another image. This is the Milky Way. So even before the retrofit, we could still just barely see the Milky Way. We were at 20.4. This is from my front yard. There's a street light right below, and you can actually see the high pressure sodium, because it's not very well shielded, actually reflecting off some of the low-lying haze. So that just goes to sort of show that, with the old lighting, there was a fair amount of uplight, and that was one of the goals, is let's try to curtail that a bit.
Paul, you're so connected to this project. I know you were very instrumental in the design and the testing. So kind of walk us through this process.
Yeah, so we worked very closely with Tim and Pepperell to achieve Pepperell's goals in the project, which was to eliminate light trespassing. You can see on the left-hand side, there's an LED light, and then there's the existing technology before conversions, high pressure sodium. So the LED light, it may be a little bit difficult to see in the picture, has less sky glow because we've used lower Kelvin color temperature. We went over that before. CCT, the American Medical Association and Dark Sky Association fixes an upward limit of 3,000. In this project, and you can see on the right, we did a pilot with varying fixture types and varying color temperatures, and what won out and what was selected by the town for dark sky purposes was a 2200 Kelvin color temperature fixture. So really reducing dramatically sky glow, and then from a design standpoint, and we recommend this for any municipality that has not undergone yet a conversion, make sure that you apply the proper photometric design. So the components that Keith went over before, color temperature, lumens, and light distribution. Directing that light where it's needed, deploying the correct color temperature to reduce your sky glow, and giving you the proper lumens so that you're providing safe lighting and not overlighting.
And Paul, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the underlined text in blue that, having this level of control actually didn't cost more, and that there was actually a financial return to the community as well.
That's right. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that, Chelsea, because that is another important component for cities that are looking to do an LED conversion, and overlaying the smart controls with Keith's company, with Ubiquia. You can really hone in on your ROI. There are jurisdictions now in the United States that incorporate meter billing. So if you do incorporate a dimming schedule with smart controls with your lighting, you can actually benefit not just by reducing your energy, but by reducing your cost.
I know that makes a big difference to folks. And I think the next slide is yours as well, Paul.
Yeah, so there are a lot of benefits to reducing light pollution, and we've gone over some of them sort of generally, but I'd like to give everybody maybe a little bit of data to frame that, right? So reducing emissions, studies have shown that the IDA, approximately 21 million tons of carbon dioxide is released each year due to wasted outdoor lighting. Lower costs, again from the IDA, $3.3 billion in excess or misdirected light costs every year. Public safety. UK has done some studies on public safety. Turning off or dimming lights actually reduces break-ins. And I know it's counterintuitive, but too much lighting can actually make your cities less safe. Tourism, Colorado. There was a study done recently using 10-year forecast of visitors to national parks in the Colorado Plateau with standard input-output modeling. They found non-local tourists who value dark skies will spend about $5.8 billion over the next 10 years in the Colorado Plateau. Now, obviously, it's not all due to dark skies, but one of the reasons people go to the Colorado Plateau and other areas and perhaps in your states and specifically in the Western U.S. is to see those dark skies. And then ecosystem. It may be difficult to quantify in some cases, but common sense applies here. And knowing that if there's a predatory animal that depends on being able to sneak up on their prey, having an overlit ecosystem is going to affect their feeding habits. And there have also been some studies on overlighting and its effect on migratory birds.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I really, again, like this slide so much, because if you look at any one of these groups in isolation, it's easy to assume that they would have very different motivations and very different solutions. But in this case, it is all the same solutions, so we can save the planet and save the economy, save some money, and save people's lives all at the same time. Everyone wins. So Paul, one more slide for you, and then we'll move to Keith.
Great, thank you. So photometric lighting design, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but it's really critical to get your lighting right when you're doing an upgrade. We use as a guideline the IES or RP8 guidelines for lighting design, which takes into account what they call bug rating, so backlighting, uplighting, glare, illuminance. Essentially, we're modeling a municipality looking at vehicular and pedestrian traffic and making sure that as a vehicle, for example, is moving from light pole to light pole, we're eliminating those dark spots, as Tim alluded to before, where you've got sidewalks, making sure that light distribution is adequate, not just for the vehicles, but for the pedestrians as well. We've talked already about CCT or color temperature. So, that's going to be subjective. It'll be for each municipality to decide what is the proper color temperature. But, obviously this group here, looking at the effects on sky glow and light trespass, where we've definitely moved, and most municipalities have, maximizing their Kelvin color temperature on LED upgrades at 3000 or below. And as Chelsea mentioned, you don't have to sacrifice safety. If you're applying proper photometric design, you're getting safe lighting with lower Kelvin color temperature. And then I am going to leave the last point here to Keith, but before I do so, there's a note here at the top of the slide about acquiring your streetlights. So Pepperell was one of those communities, and Massachusetts is one of those states that enacted legislation that permits municipalities to take ownership of your streetlights. And there are numerous advantages to doing so. First and foremost, it gives you complete control over this really important asset that you have, which are your streetlights, deciding what proper lighting looks like, deciding important things about color temperature and light distribution. But it's also become quite a strategic asset. Keith's firm, Ubiquia, in addition to smart controls, they manufacture a whole host of IoT integrated devices which integrate into the light pole, which are now becoming the main delivery infrastructure for smart city services. So, right now, if you live in a state where the utility owns that, they also control that. And we think in most cities that are in states where there is a path to ownership, think it makes sense for cities to take ownership of that strategic asset. I'll pass it over to you now, Keith, to go over some more of the impacts of lighting controls.
Sure, and Paul, you're absolutely correct. When you look at all the projects that a city can do, there aren't many that can touch this many different elements, from safety to energy to sky glow, and have a positive effect on cash. We all have buckets as a city of where our costs are. We're not going to solve homelessness through street lighting, but perhaps we can save money in these buckets that we spend on street lighting and put them into buckets that are matter more to us. So that's the way a city can look at some of these projects, is they can, through efforts with Real-Term and others, gain a return and use that money elsewhere. And we talk a lot about LEDs, right? This is the fundamental core of our conversation. So I want to talk a little bit about dimming an LED and what that means, and what an LED actually is, because at the core root of the technology is a diode, and how the diode operates is fundamental to how we can do things. So if you go to the next slide, Chelsea.
Thanks.
The diode is a chemical, is created through a process called metal organic chemical vapor deposition, right? So it's an organic chemical device. It is a device that is affected by current. So over time, the flow of current through this organic device degrades that chip, right? An LED in the form of a light or a fixture consists of three components, right? It is the chip, it is a phosphorus layer, and it is a lens. So the three of them combined create what is an LED light. We call it an LED, but it is an LED with other things attached to it. Those three components, the chip affected by current, and the lens and the phosphorus layer, are affected by heat. So reducing the power through an LED or through a driver that powers an LED can extend the life of the fixture, but it also can enable you to dim. So one of the fundamental design requirements when you create a fixture is that you want this fixture to be rated at the output that it is for at the end of life. So if it is 3 lumens per square foot is the design criteria that you've developed this fixture for, that is rated at the 10 or 15-year mark, right? So out of the box, it will be overlit to ultimately degrade to that rated output, because you don't want to, at the 10-year point or the 8-year point, say it's no longer meeting the original specification and replace it. So by design, and it's somewhat of a failure by design, it is overlit from the start. So utilizing controls, you can reduce that output to its rated output from day one, and it's a term we call constant light output, right? So it always maintains the same level of output. You're actually dimming from the peak at the start to the constant light output point over the duration of the life of the fixture. And in doing so, you're saving on average from 20 to 35% energy, extending the life of the fixture by 25%, and you're never going below the rated output. If you go below the rated output, so you go to 75%, 60%, 50%, you're still providing a sufficient amount of light that is considered safe, right? And you can also measure it against IEC standards, IES standards, which is the amount of light on the street that is required for walking down the street safely, cars traveling down the street. But the whole point is you can dim without ever going below the rated output of a fixture and still have a significant impact on sky glow, energy, extend the life of the fixture, and all those benefits are there without ever going below that level. So it's just a phenomenon of the device itself, or how an LED is created.
Yeah, and if I'm understanding this from a non-technical point of view, you want the light appropriately shining down on the street or the environment where you need it, not reflected back up to the sky where it's just being wasted and potentially even causing harm.
Correct. And out of the box, we even have situations where engineers will over-design to compensate for the degradation curve. And then the degradation curve from the fixture manufacturer is over-designed. So you have an extremely bright light out of the box. And that can be cut to its rated output immediately and have all the other benefits that we've spoken about.
Yeah, great. So Tim, answer the big question. Did we see any more stars? How does the story end?
Yeah, so it ended up with a pretty happy ending. Yes, the answer is yes. We saw more stars. We actually went backwards in time. So first off, for the municipal leaders, we saved 81% of our electricity. And that's even an improvement over Paul's original numbers because now we were the master of our own destiny. Pepperell actually decided that in the middle hours, we actually wanted a little bit of a unique dimming schedule. We wanted down to 50% the first and last 2 hours of the night. But in the middle 6 or 7 hours, we decided that we actually wanted only 30% of the light, and we were able to save even more energy. And that was really exciting. Just, if anybody cares about climate change or energy reduction, that's just a really great number, is 81%. But the decrease in sky glow was on average somewhere around 24% in the sections of town that we measured. So we did a before and an after installation. And that was really exciting because there's only been a couple places that have sort of successfully managed to do this, and this is a pretty significant change. So this gives us a lot more time. This gives us more time to deal with some other issues related to lighting in town. And you might think, sometimes municipal leaders or the public are sort of concerned because 30% seems like a really low number. There was 0 complaints. And even talking to our police chief, who surveyed his night shift officers, they actually felt that roadway visibility had improved, that glare was reduced, and there was no increase in crime or incidents with roadway safety or accidents or so on in the year since we did this installation. So that was also really exciting too, because we thought that's what would happen. And that's, the other neat part was this is what people wanted. When we did the survey, we did the first week at 100% level, the second week at 50%. People preferred a few things out of that study. One, people don't like glare. It's sort of universal. People don't like glare. Glare reduces visibility. It makes it harder to see a deer on the side of the road or people in a crosswalk. And so people wanted to minimize glare. So they wanted better shielding. Those are the fixtures they chose. They wanted the lower color temperature. So ironically, the 2 lights that they preferred was the 2200K LED. That's sort of that orangey glow. And turns out that was designed to mimic the old high pressure sodium light. So that was the other light they preferred. They preferred the 2 warmer colored lights over a higher color temperature, the more blue lights. So, the design principles we came into this were sort of supported by the public, and we got what the people there wanted. And then on the right, you see two images of what the after effects. One is our downtown at night. This is what Pepperell looks like. And on the top image, this is taken from my back deck. This is actually the dimmer part of the Milky Way. And we can actually see that number went up. So you can see that, the original image from my yard was about 20.4. Now we're at 20.63. And you can see, this is one single image. You can see a lot of neat stuff just from, I live in a busy road. So this was really exciting that, we can do this, and hopefully this gets copied in whatever form that works for other communities.
Yeah.
in other parts of the country.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting, and what a gorgeous picture. I mean, it's really quite stunning. And I appreciate what you all did in Pepperell, where you did a before and after, and you really use this as an opportunity to bring people together and ask what they want and what they need, and to kind of open the forum for community engagement. I think that's a really nice best practice. So on the next slide, actually, this will be kind of open to everyone to kind of jump in. And, I know we've talked about a lot in terms of what we needed to learn and what promises we set. So I'll just kind of take this as, Paul, Keith, and Tim jump into whatever part sounds good for you. And we do have a couple of questions, by the way. I see a couple coming in. So as you're watching and listening, feel free to throw those in your chat, and we'll take those in the next section.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind taking that first one, just to sort of highlight in a couple other issues as it affects your community. So one, we talked a lot about stars and dark sky, and that's obviously something I care about a lot, and many people do too. But there's some other harmful things about lighting if it's not done properly or well designed. So one is, we know if things are too glary, it becomes harder to see people in crosswalks. That's one of the reasons the American Medical Association chimed in about that. We talked about the blue light disrupting circadian rhythms. That's humans, that's animals, that's pretty much almost any living creature is affected by this. And so, whether it is your sleep disruption that then results in increased rates of, say, breast cancer or metabolic disorders or diabetes. There's a whole host of issues. If you have light trespass coming in your window and it's disrupting your sleep, that has a huge impact on you. It disrupts pollinators. We know that. If you disrupt pollinators from light pollution, you can have something like a 13% reduction in crop yield. So there's these broad issues. If we're not controlling the light to where it needs to be and doing it well, there's issues beyond even the stars. Nature
will remind us. Keith or Paul, any thoughts about this final slide?
Yeah, so I'll just reiterate what I said before, and that is anybody that's looking at doing an upgrade, really pay careful attention to photometric design. It's also an argument for owning your lights rather than having your electric utility do it. And this is not to bash any of the electric utilities. They're fine entities. They're good at what they do, but the fact remains they're not going to spend the same sort of care and attention that you as a municipality will when it comes to customized lighting. So they typically, when they do an upgrade, they do a 1-for-1 conversion. So everywhere where you'll have a particular wattage, let's say 100 or 150 high pressure sodium, they'll replace that across the board with an LED equivalent. Well, that's not really customized lighting, and that's it's not addressing areas where you're overlit and you're underlit. And most municipalities in North America and throughout the world are overlit and underlit everywhere. So if you're going to undertake a conversion, do it properly. It won't cost you any more because you're going to save money by customizing and dialing in on proper lighting design. And always, and I'd say 100% of the projects that we've done now over the last couple of years have incorporated lighting controls. Maybe I'll pass that over to Keith.
No, I think that's it's a reminder to challenge yourself to look at lighting differently. Look at lighting as energy waste, and look at it not as just something to use to light something up. You can drive through any neighborhood and you can see light waste anywhere. And I think that's important for us to understand the need to control light, either through the efficient design of a fixture, the selection of the materials and the type of fixtures that we use, but as well as the control. Controls in an interior world are a given, right? We have a light switch for every light. We've quickly added dimmers to our society and our indoor life, and the same goes true for the outdoor world. We carefully select the type of light we put over a fireplace or near a table, but we certainly need to do the same for our streets and control them at the same level of care. And I think it's important to know that all of these things have impacts, not just on on energy or sky glow, but safety, grid resiliency, and carbon emissions. There are very few projects as a city that you can take on that have impacts on all of these, and they're all positive. I challenge people to find the negatives of doing it. Cost is it, but we've seen through many of these projects there's a payback, and it's pretty quick. And in most cases, through help of like Realterm and others, you can balance the savings versus the cost and don't see any negative financial impact to a city. So I think those are the takeaways for me.
Great. It's great to have some good news, and thanks for the great wrap-up thoughts. We have quite a few questions, actually, so I'm going to do my best to move through these quickly. So we'll move to the next slide, just so we'll have everybody's contact information on there. First question is from Robert Burgess. Robert, thank you for your questions. How do you account for the albedo, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, of the ground surface in your design? And Robert says, I'm thinking about car dealerships with lots of shiny surfaces to reflect off of. And I know we covered this a bit in our in-person panel discussion. We were talking about large retailers with some of those really large lights. So how do city leaders account for that in their design? Keith, that might be for you or Paul. Maybe y'all can tag team on that.
Yeah, car dealerships were the first project that anyone in outdoor lighting did 10 years ago, right? It was there is a direct return because car dealerships pay for the energy that they use, right? As do most commercial and industrial applications, malls, private, anybody who owns their lights and pays on a meter, those ROIs are much easier to calculate, right? So they were the first projects to go. Car dealerships, there's a school of thought to them. The dealership wants to draw attention to the higher value cars on the lot, and they can use lighting to do that. But at night, large volumes of light on large lots is not necessarily the greatest thing. But what we've seen is exactly what I just said. Car dealers take the cars that they want accentuated and draw your eye to, whether that's safe or not is up to debate, and then lower the rest of the lot, right? Because not every car on the lot is going to catch somebody's eye, so they want to draw it towards specific things. And they also use lighting as safety in car lots with things like catalytic converters being stolen, lowering light levels really, really low on the main lot, keeping just a few spots lit, and then as a car enters the parking lot, have the lights come up. Anyone pulling into a lot where the lights suddenly change on you at least catches your attention. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but we've seen dynamic lighting more prevalent in C&I, commercial, industrial, and car dealerships because of a lot of these different phenomenons wanting to draw specific attention to areas, and reducing light level is a direct impact on bottom line. So there aren't a lot of mandates, I think, and I think Tim, you mentioned this during our conversation down in DC, but I think the towns are getting more involved with the implementation of commercial lighting and what standards they follow. Even though they're not city-owned lights, they're certainly pushing that direction.
Yeah, and I see the technology is just advancing so quickly. So perhaps a lot of it is just education, and as the technology advances, we can do better, I think. Our next question is from Larissa, who's asking, what do you think about DLC Luna listed luminaries? And we have 7 minutes left and about 7 questions, so we're going to move fast through these.
I'll leave that to Paul. Or...
I surely can't answer the question. I don't know what DLC Luna listed luminaries are, so somebody else will have to take that.
Well, anything that provides a positive direction in design towards proper way to design a fixture or provide light is going to be a positive. So I'll say that.
Perfect. Next question from Daniel is asking, what are the first steps for municipality to begin addressing towards dark skies requirements? Tim, that's probably a great question for you. Where do people begin?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it starts with, a meeting, whether you have a city council or a, board of selectmen, sort of introducing yourself and stating that, you want to be involved. And it took some conversations, to sort of get a seat at the table, and then, getting to know our town administrator. And then once, Paul's team contacted the town administrator knew to contact me, and we put together a group of citizens who are, cared about this from a variety of different angles, not just, the astronomy angle. And we got involved, and we sort of proposed, what if we had some say in this? And fortunately, the town government was agreeable to that. And I think you see the results of getting involved. The other aspect too is regulations are important. That's one thing we're seeing a huge demand for, because it's not just the streetlights, it's car dealerships, it's people's lights, floodlights pointing into each other's windows and so on. So there's a huge demand, I think, all over the place for some form of lighting regulations. One of the reasons we're pushing Massachusetts is because we're actually the only state in the Northeast without any lighting legislation. But even individual towns and cities are passing a wide variety of types of regulations. And we have a model bylaw. People can feel free to contact me, and I can send them some of the stuff that we've generated. But we're hoping to sort of give people a starter to get them started, and they can tailor it to their community, just as we did with this lighting.
Great, that's excellent. And Tim's and everyone's contact information is listed on this slide, so please feel free to reach out. It's a very knowledgeable expert in this area. The next question from John is around cost considerations. So I'll pass this to Paul and to Keith. What do you say to a community that says they can't afford to pay more than, I think the number is 2,200K versus 3,000K, or that they can't find a supplier who will provide lights under a certain budget? How do you all handle that?
So yeah, we handle that on the front end. It's critical for any municipality that's looking to undergo a lighting conversion to understand what the cost and the savings look like. So we suggest either through us or yourselves model that project. We've seen the ROI across the 13 or 14 states where we've done projects to be pretty compelling. Paybacks are often in the 2 to 6 year range, which is fantastic for an infrastructure project. And if you don't have the funds, or you don't have a capital improvement project budget or a bond going out to cover that, these projects are really simple to finance. Most states have lighting as a non-metered billing. So once you know the reduction in wattage and you know how many hours your lights are on, we can predict with great accuracy what your savings is going to look like. Probably the most common financing vehicle that we've deployed for these projects, it's called a TELP, a tax exempt lease program. So it's pretty simple, basic operational lease with very, very little upfront administrative and legal costs, usually under $1,000. Takes less than 30 days to implement. Your first payment is delayed for a year, so you can accumulate savings before you have to make any payments. And typically, your savings is going to cover those loan payments. So there's zero capital outlay. Very painless way to finance an upgrade.
Perfect, great answer. And for our final question, just in the 2 minutes we have left, from Gordon, can using dimmable LEDs help prevent their premature failure? And what particular the loss of phosphor coating that causes them to turn purple? Keith, that sounds like a you question.
Yes, so those are two separate things really. I'll address the purple one first. The delamination of the phosphorus layer that can cause a fixture to turn purple is more of a manufacturing process concern and selecting fixtures. And I think, in all honesty, we're not a fixture manufacturer, but we work with fixture manufacturers, and it was an issue that occurred through manufacturing that I think what I understand is to be solved. But be asked the question of the fixture manufacturer when you select it, if that falls under warranty. As far as choosing a dimmable fixture, will it help prevent premature failure? It certainly can, because as we talked earlier, reducing the power of the driver through dimming and thus reducing the amount of current through the LED can actually extend the life of the fixture. Not only that, but one of the great things that a control system does is it can tell you exactly how many burn hours you've used on that fixture, how long it's been installed, what the serial number is, whether it's still under warranty, right? So keeping track of your assets is like lighting control 101. Like, we don't always talk about it, but knowing where they all are, knowing what their GPS coordinates are, what pole they are on, and when they were installed, controlling your assets, predicting when they're going to be end of life is another part of it. But dimming it even along just the degradation curve, which is not going below the rated output. So you're not technically dimming, you're just providing constant light over the life of the fixture. Clever way of saying it. But those are all things that are extending the life of your fixture and preventing it from failing before it's supposed to.
Great. Well, I love the opportunity to share good news with everyone as we wrap up this webinar, and thank you for all of your time and your expertise. It's really always a good time to visit with you all. So thanks everyone for joining us. Again, please reach out to our esteemed panelists. Thanks to everyone at Smart Cities Connect working behind the scenes to make this all possible, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.